You know what's absolutely wild? Right now, as you're watching this video, there's probably a thought in your head that you wish wasn't there. Maybe it's telling you something disturbing about yourself. Maybe it's showing you a horrifying image you can't unsee. Or maybe it's whispering that something terrible is about to happen, and it's all your fault. And here's the kicker. The more you try to push that thought away, the louder it gets. It's like your brain has turned into a broken record player that only plays the songs you hate most. But what if I told you that everything you're doing to fight these intrusive thoughts is actually the exact reason they won't leave you alone? What if the solution isn't to fight harder, but to stop fighting altogether? Stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you completely changed how I understand the human mind, and it might just be the key to finally finding peace in yours. Let me start by telling you something that might sound counterintuitive. Intrusive thoughts are not your enemy. I know, that sounds absolutely insane when you're dealing with thoughts that make you question your sanity, your morality, or your safety. But here's what's really happening in your brain right now. Every single human being on this planet has intrusive thoughts. Yes, every single one. That person you admire who seems to have it all together, they have them too. Your therapist, they have them. That spiritual guru on social media who posts about inner peace definitely has them. The difference between someone who suffers from intrusive thoughts and someone who doesn't isn't the presence of the thoughts themselves. It's what happens next, and that's where everything falls apart for most people. Your brain is essentially a thought-producing machine. It's constantly generating thousands of thoughts per day, most of which are completely random, meaningless, and bizarre. It's doing this because that's literally its job. Throughout human evolution, the brain that survived was the brain that could anticipate danger, imagine worst-case scenarios, and constantly scan for threats. Your ancestors who heard a rustling in the bushes and thought it might be a dangerous predator, they lived. The ones who ignored it, well, they didn't pass on their genes, so your brain inherited this incredible capacity for vigilance, for imagination, for creating scenarios that help you prepare and survive. But here's the problem with living in the modern world. Your brain hasn't gotten the memo that you're not actually being chased by predators anymore. It's still running that same ancient software in a world that doesn't require that level of constant threat assessment. So what happens? Your brain tosses out random thoughts all day long. Most of them you don't even notice. You don't freak out when you have the thought, "I wonder what's for dinner," or "that cloud looks like a horse," because these thoughts feel neutral. They come, you might acknowledge them or not, and they float away like leaves on a stream. But then one day, your brain generates a thought that feels different. Maybe it's violent, maybe it's sexual, maybe it's about contamination or harm or something taboo. And unlike all those other random thoughts, this one makes you stop in your tracks. Your heart rate increases, your palms get sweaty, and suddenly you're thinking, wait, why would I think that? What does this mean about me? Am I a bad person? Am I dangerous? Am I going crazy? And right there, in that moment of panic and confusion, you've just done the one thing that guarantees this thought will come back to haunt you. You've given it significance. Think about your brain like it's a notification system on your phone. When you get a notification, you can do one of two things. You can glance at it, see it's not important, and swipe it away without a second thought. Or you can open it, read it carefully, analyze it, share it with others. Think deeply about what it means, and keep checking back to see if there's more information. Now, which notification do you think your phone is going to prioritize showing you again? Obviously, the one you engaged with, the one you showed interest in, the one you treated as important. Your brain works the exact same way. When an intrusive thought pops up, and you react with fear, disgust, or intense curiosity about what it means, your brain interprets this as, "Oh, this must be really important information. I better keep bringing this up so they can deal with this threat." But here's where it gets even more insidious. Most people, when they have an intrusive thought that scares them, immediately try to do something about it. They try to push the thought away. They try to replace it with a better thought. They try to analyze whether they really would do the thing they're thinking about. They seek reassurance from others. They avoid situations that might trigger the thought, or they perform mental rituals to neutralize the thought. And every single one of these responses, while completely understandable and done with the best intentions, is actually feeding the problem. You see, each time you engage in any of these behaviors, You're sending a message to your brain that says, yes, this thought is dangerous, this thought is important, we need to keep monitoring for this thought. And so your brain, being the helpful organ that it is, says, got it, I'll make sure to keep checking for this and alerting you whenever anything related to this comes up. This creates what psychologists call the ironic process theory, or what most people know as the white bear problem. If I tell you right now, whatever you do, don't think about a white bear, what happens? Immediately a white bear pops into your mind. You can try as hard as you want to not think about it, but the very act of trying not to think about something requires you to monitor whether you're thinking about it, which means you have to keep referencing the very thing you're trying to avoid. It's like trying to not think about your breathing right now. Oops, now you're thinking about it. Your brain cannot process the negative command of don't think. It only processes the content, which means every time you tell yourself, don't think about that disturbing thought, you're actually bringing that thought back into your awareness. Let me give you a real example of how this plays out. Imagine someone has an intrusive thought while holding a baby. The thought is something like, what if I drop this baby? Now, this is actually an incredibly common intrusive thought that many new parents have, and it doesn't mean anything except that your brain is aware babies are fragile and you're in a position where you're responsible for one. But let's say this person doesn't know that intrusive thoughts are normal. They have this thought and immediately panic. They think, oh my God, why would I think that? Does this mean I want to hurt the baby? What if I actually do it? I must be a terrible person. So what do? They start avoiding holding the baby. They start mentally reviewing every time they hold the baby to make sure they're being careful enough. They ask their partner for reassurance that they would never hurt the baby. They Google thoughts about dropping baby at 3 in the morning. And what happens? The thoughts get worse and worse. They come more frequently. They feel more real, they're more distressing. Not because this person is dangerous, not because they actually want to hurt anyone, but because they've told their brain through their actions that this thought is a 5-alarm fire that needs constant attention. Now contrast that with someone who has the same intrusive thought but responds differently. They're holding a baby. The thought pops up, what if I dropped this baby? And they notice it the same way they'd notice any other random thought. They might think, weird thought, brain, and then continue holding the baby and having a conversation or looking at their phone or thinking about what they need to buy at the grocery store. They don't engage with the thought. They don't analyze it. They don't treat it as meaningful. It's just mental noise. And because they didn't give it any significance, their brain doesn't flag it as important, and the thought naturally fades away and doesn't come back with any intensity. This is the crucial difference, and it's what this entire video is about. The thing you need to stop doing, the behavior that keeps intrusive thoughts alive and makes them grow stronger, is engaging with them as if they're important, as if they mean something, as if they require a response. And I know what you're thinking right now, because I thought the same thing when I first learned this. You're thinking, but my thoughts feel different. My thoughts feel real. My thoughts are about something serious. I can't just ignore them, because what if they're actually warning me about something real? And that's exactly the trap. That's exactly what keeps you stuck. Here's something that will blow your mind. The content of your intrusive thoughts tells you absolutely nothing about who you are or what you want. Nothing. Zero. Let me say that again because it's so important. The content of intrusive thoughts is meaningless. A person who has violent intrusive thoughts is not more violent than anyone else. A person who has intrusive thoughts about their sexuality is not confused about their sexuality. A person who has intrusive thoughts about being contaminated is not dirty. The thoughts are random neural firings that your brain generated, and the only reason they keep coming back is because of how you're responding to them. The content feels significant because of the emotional reaction you're having, but the emotional reaction is coming from the meaning you're assigning to the thoughts, not from the thoughts themselves. Think about it this way. If intrusive thoughts actually meant something about your desires or your character, then why do they feel so distressing? People who actually want to do harmful things don't have intrusive thoughts about those things. They have fantasies, and fantasies feel good. They're enjoyable to think about. Intrusive thoughts, by definition, are ego-dystonic, which means they go against your values and your sense of self. They're distressing precisely because they don't align with who you are. A person who's genuinely dangerous doesn't lie awake at night worrying that they might be dangerous. The very fact that you're disturbed by these thoughts is evidence that they don't represent your true desires or character. But here's what happens when you don't understand this. You start creating what's called a thought-action fusion, where you believe that having a thought is morally equivalent to doing the action, or that having a thought makes the action more likely to happen. This is completely false, but it feels true when you're in the grip of anxiety. So you start policing your thoughts, trying to make sure you only have good, pure, safe thoughts. And this is absolutely exhausting and completely impossible. You cannot control what thoughts pop into your head. You just can't. Thought control is a myth. What you can control is what you do next, how you respond, whether you engage or whether you let the thought pass. Now let me tell you what actually works, what actually makes intrusive thoughts collapse and lose their power over you. It's the complete opposite of what your anxiety is telling you to do. Instead of fighting the thoughts, you allow them. Instead of pushing them away, you make room for them. Instead of analyzing them, you acknowledge them without judgment. Instead of seeking certainty about what they mean, you embrace the uncertainty. This is called acceptance, and it's one of the most powerful tools in modern psychology for dealing with intrusive thoughts and anxiety. Acceptance doesn't mean you like the thoughts, or that you agree with them, or that you want them to be there. It just means you stop fighting against them. Think of it like this. Imagine you're standing in the ocean and waves keep coming. You can try to push against every wave, exhausting yourself and still getting knocked over, or you can learn to ride with the waves, letting them pass through you without resistance. The waves don't care whether you fight them or not. They're going to keep coming either way because that's what oceans do. But your experience of those waves, how much they knock you around, how much energy you waste, how much suffering you experience, that's completely dependent on your response. When an intrusive thought comes up, the most powerful thing you can do is notice it and name it. You can literally say to yourself, "Oh, there's an intrusive thought," or "My brain is doing that thing again," or "Hello, anxiety, I see you." You're not arguing with it, you're not analyzing it, you're just acknowledging its presence the way you might acknowledge a car driving by your house. The car exists, you noticed it, and now it's gone. You don't run outside to inspect the car. You don't call the police to investigate why that particular car was on your street. You don't spend the next hour Googling whether seeing that car means something bad is going to happen. You just let it drive by. The next part is crucial. After you notice and name the thought, you redirect your attention to what you were doing. Not as a way to avoid or escape the thought, but as a way to practice living your life, even when uncomfortable thoughts are present. This is about building your tolerance for discomfort, your ability to have thoughts and feelings that you don't like while still doing what matters to you. If you're at work when an intrusive thought hits, you acknowledge it and then return your focus to your work. If you're with friends, you notice the thought and then bring your attention back to the conversation. If you're alone, you let the thought be there in the background while you continue with whatever you are doing, whether that's reading, cooking, exercising, or just sitting with your coffee. This is going to feel wrong at first. Your anxiety is going to scream at you that you need to do something about the thought right now. It's going to tell you that ignoring it is dangerous, that you need to figure it out, that you need to make sure you're not a bad person, that you need to get certainty. This is the moment where everything changes, where you have a choice. You can listen to the anxiety and go back to all those old behaviors that have never actually made the thoughts go away, or you can do something different. You can feel the anxiety, notice the urge to engage with the thought, and choose to do nothing. Just sit with the discomfort. Let it be there. It's not going to hurt you, even though it feels awful. Feelings, no matter how intense, cannot harm you. They're just sensations in your body and noise in your mind. What happens when you consistently respond this way is actually pretty remarkable. At first, nothing seems to change. The thoughts might even get worse temporarily because your brain is confused. It's like, wait, I'm sending these urgent alerts about danger and you're not responding. So let me send them louder and more frequently to make sure you got the message. This is called an extinction burst, and it's completely normal. It's actually a sign that you're doing the right thing. If you push through this phase and continue to not engage with the thoughts, continue to let them be there without reacting, something shifts. The thoughts start to lose their emotional charge. They become less frequent. When they do show up, they don't grab your attention the same way. Eventually, they fade into the background noise of all your other random thoughts, just another thing your brain does that doesn't mean anything important. But here's the thing that most people miss, and it's why they give up too early or think this approach isn't working. The goal is not to make the intrusive thoughts stop. If you're using acceptance as a strategy to get rid of the thoughts, you're still engaging with them. You're still treating them as a problem that needs to be solved, and you're still feeding the cycle. The goal is to change your relationship with the thoughts so that it doesn't matter whether they're there or not. You're building a life where you can have these thoughts and still do everything you want to do, be who you want to be, and live according to your values. The thoughts become irrelevant, not because they've disappeared, but because they no longer control your behavior or dictate your emotional state. This is what freedom from intrusive thoughts actually looks like. It's not a thought-free mind. It's not perfect mental silence or perpetual peace. It's a messy, noisy mind that generates all kinds of content, and you're okay with that. You've stopped being at war with your own brain. You've stopped treating every thought like it's a referendum on your character or a prediction of your future. You've developed what psychologists call cognitive diffusion, the ability to separate yourself from your thoughts, to see them as mental events rather than as truths or threats or meaningful indicators of anything. Let me give you some practical ways to build this skill, because it's not always intuitive, especially if you've been stuck in the pattern of fighting your thoughts for months or years. One technique is to practice observer perspective with your thoughts. Instead of being inside the thought, caught up in its content and meaning, you step back and observe it from a distance. You might imagine your thoughts as cars on a highway that you're watching from an overpass. You can see each thought vehicle drive by. You can notice what it looks like, but you don't jump into the car and go for a ride. Or you might imagine your thoughts as items on a conveyor belt at a factory. Each thought appears, you see it, and then it moves along and disappears. You're the factory worker observing the conveyor belt, not the conveyor belt itself. Another technique is to add a little phrase before your intrusive thought that creates distance. Instead of "I'm going to hurt someone," you think "I'm having the thought that I might hurt someone." Instead of "I'm contaminated," you think "My mind is telling me the story that I'm contaminated." This simple linguistic shift reminds you that thoughts are just thoughts. They're not facts. They're not you. They're not commands. They're just mental content that your brain generated. You can also get playful with this. Some people find it helpful to imagine their intrusive thoughts in a silly voice, like a cartoon character or a foreign accent. When the thought loses its serious, threatening quality and becomes absurd, it's much easier to let it pass without engaging. You can also practice purposely inviting the thoughts in, which sounds completely counterintuitive, but is actually incredibly powerful. This is the basis of exposure and response prevention therapy, which is the gold standard treatment for OCD and intrusive thoughts. Instead of waiting for the thought to ambush you and then trying to fight it off, you voluntarily bring the thought to mind, sit with the discomfort it causes, and practice not doing any of your usual rituals or safety behaviors. So if you have intrusive thoughts about contamination, you might think, "Maybe I am contaminated, maybe I did touch something dirty, maybe I will get sick," and then resist the urge to wash your hands or seek reassurance. You're teaching your brain through direct experience that the thought is not dangerous, that the anxiety it causes will naturally decrease without you having to do anything, and that you can tolerate uncertainty and discomfort. The reason this works is because of how our emotional system functions. Anxiety is designed to spike quickly in the presence of perceived threat, and then naturally decrease once the threat is gone, or once your brain realizes the threat was a false alarm. But when you do safety behaviors or avoidance or mental rituals, you prevent your anxiety from completing its natural cycle. You artificially keep it elevated because you never allow yourself to learn that you were safe all along. Exposure breaks this pattern by letting you experience the full anxiety cycle, the spike, and then the natural decrease, without doing anything to interfere with it. Over time, your brain learns that the trigger isn't actually dangerous, and it stops sending such intense alarm signals. Now I want to address something really important. If you're dealing with severe intrusive thoughts, especially if they're part of OCD or another anxiety disorder, please work with a mental health professional who specializes in these issues. What I'm describing here is based on evidence-based treatments like ACT and ERP, But having a skilled therapist guide you through this process can make a huge difference. They can help you identify your specific patterns, create a treatment plan that's tailored to your situation, and support you through the difficult early phases when it feels like nothing is working. There's no shame in getting professional help. In fact, it's one of the smartest things you can do. I also want to talk about the role of self-compassion in all of this, because it's something that often gets overlooked. When you're dealing with intrusive thoughts, especially ones that are disturbing or taboo, it's really easy to be incredibly hard on yourself. You might feel ashamed, broken, crazy, or fundamentally flawed. You might compare yourself to other people who don't seem to struggle with these things and wonder what's wrong with you. But the truth is, you're not broken. Your brain is functioning exactly as human brains do. You're experiencing something that millions of people experience, but don't talk about because of stigma and shame. The fact that you're watching this video, trying to understand and work with your mind, rather than just suffering in silence, shows tremendous courage and self-awareness. Being compassionate with yourself means talking to yourself the way you'd talk to a good friend who came to you with the same problem. You wouldn't tell them they're crazy or bad or weak. You'd probably tell them that what they're experiencing is difficult but manageable, that they're doing the best they can, that having these thoughts doesn't make them a bad person. Give yourself that same kindness. When an intrusive thought comes up, instead of berating yourself or spiraling into shame, you might say something like, "This is really hard and I'm doing my best," or "Lots of people deal with this, I'm not alone," or "This thought is uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous and it will pass." This kind of self-talk doesn't eliminate the thoughts, but it changes the emotional environment in which they occur, making them less overwhelming and easier to work with. Another crucial piece of this puzzle is understanding the role that stress, fatigue, and general mental health play in intrusive thoughts. When you're stressed out, not sleeping well, dealing with major life changes, or struggling with depression or anxiety, intrusive thoughts tend to get worse. This doesn't mean you're backsliding or that the techniques aren't working. It just means your brain is under more strain, and therefore more prone to generating unwanted content and less able to regulate your emotional responses. During these times, it's especially important to practice good self-care. Make sure you're getting enough sleep, moving your body, eating regularly, connecting with people you care about, and doing things that bring you joy or relaxation. These aren't just nice-to-haves. They're fundamental to mental health and to having the resources to cope with difficult thoughts and feelings. I want to share something that changed my entire perspective on this. There's a concept in ACT called willingness, which is different from wanting. You don't have to want intrusive thoughts to be there. You don't have to like them or approve of them. But you can be willing to have them, meaning you're willing to make room for them in your experience without constantly fighting against them. It's the difference between a clenched fist trying to push something away and an open hand that can hold both pleasant and unpleasant things. When you develop willingness, you're essentially saying, "I don't like this, but I can handle it being here." This subtle shift from wanting thoughts to go away to being willing to have them present is what creates space for real change. You might be wondering how long this process takes, and the honest answer is that it varies. Some people notice significant improvement in a few weeks, others take months. It depends on how long you've been stuck in the pattern of fighting your thoughts, how severe they are, what other factors are involved, and how consistently you're able to practice these new ways of responding. But here's what I can tell you with certainty. If you keep doing what you've been doing, fighting and avoiding and analyzing and seeking reassurance, the thoughts will keep coming back. They might wax and wane, but the fundamental pattern will stay the same because you're feeding it. If you're willing to try a different approach, to stop doing the things that maintain the problem, you give yourself a real chance at freedom. Not someday in the distant future after you've perfectly mastered some technique, but gradually, incrementally, starting right now. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it's empowering. You're not waiting for the thoughts to stop before you can live your life. You're not at the mercy of your brain's random content generator. You're learning that you can have any thought and still choose your actions, still be the person you want to be, still move toward what matters to you. This is genuine freedom, not the false promise of a mind without difficult content, but the real freedom that comes from not being controlled by that content, So if you take one thing away from this video, let it be this. Stop fighting your intrusive thoughts. Stop trying to push them away. Stop analyzing them. Stop treating them as meaningful. Notice them, name them, and then redirect your attention to your life. Do this consistently with self-compassion, and watch what happens. The thoughts will collapse not because you conquered them, but because you stopped giving them the fuel they need to survive.